I recently came across a sponsored ad. It looked like an article, but it wasn't, and the headline immediately caught my eye. 52% of millionaires plan to retire on $100,000 a year. What made it even more interesting is that it came from a very well-known wealth management firm. And that $100,000 figure, it sort of feels right. It's often one of the most quoted desired incomes for the everyday millionaire as they go into retirement. But when I went to look for the data behind this statistic, I couldn't find any. No study, no methodology, no verifiable source. So this means that headline is either coming from internal data from this wealth management firm, or worse, being made up to be a great headline. Hey guys, what's up? I'm Aaron, and welcome back to the channel. I don't want to go too far from this headline yet, because when you zoom out and you look at real published data available from sources like the Federal Reserve, JP Morgan, and Fidelity Investments, you do start to see a pattern emerge. Not the exact one in the headline we were talking about, but arguably something more important. Most mass affluent or millionaire households don't spread out across a wide range of spending levels in retirement. They cluster, and overwhelmingly, that cluster tends to fall somewhere between $70,000 and $120,000 per year. Now, let's pause on that, because I think that's incredibly fascinating. Because when we talk about a millionaire or a millionaire household, we're talking about a wide range of people. We could be talking about a net worth millionaire who's including their primary residence. We could be talking about a liquid millionaire who has liquid assets of $1 million or more. We could even be talking about people who have a net worth of $3, $4, $5 million or more. And all of these individuals would lead very different financial lives. And yet, something seems to happen across the vast majority of them once they get into retirement. Their spending falls in a narrow band. And if you're a numbers person, you should probably immediately be asking the question of why. Because this is not how we tend to think things work. We tend to think if people have more wealth, they're capable of more spending, and that they do more spending. But that's not really what the data shows, especially as we go into retirement. When you look at real data, not headlines, we see a clear picture. From sources like the Federal Reserve, median retiree spending isn't anywhere near $100,000. It's closer to $50,000 to $65,000 per year. But when you isolate higher income and higher net worth households, that number increases, typically into the $70,000 to $110,000 range. And here's the part that really matters. This is actual spending, not what people say they're planning on spending. Yes, higher net worth households do spend more, but their spending doesn't scale in the way that most people expect. For example, if net worth doubles, we don't see a doubling in spending. And we don't see that spending increases endlessly with wealth increasing. Rather, over time, we tend to see that it compresses. This tells us something important. People aren't just picking a number of $100,000 and saying, that's the number I want to live on in retirement. Rather, it seems like once we look at the structures underneath retirement income, that this is kind of the income that people are nudged towards. After all, the structure of retirement itself is sort of shaped by replacement rates, lifestyle shifts, guaranteed income streams like Social Security, and the financial constraints that determine what's actually sustainable. And once you see that, we can start to see that maybe the conversation isn't about $100,000 itself, but rather, why are many retirees, including wealthy ones, spending this amount? And I think it reveals something about retirement itself. There's another layer to this that I think is even more important, because it changes how you think about all those other retirement numbers. When we look at data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics and research from JP Morgan, a very clear pattern shows up. Ages 65 to 74, this is typically the peak spending phase. Ages 75 to 84, spending begins to moderately decline, and ages, say, 85 plus, spending drops more significantly. And intuitively, that makes sense. Early on in retirement, that is when people are traveling and dining out and enjoying everything they've worked so hard for. But over time, that has a way of shifting. Now, you may have heard of something called the retirement spending smile, popularized by David Blanchett, and it shows that retirement spending tends to peak early on in retirement, and then it tends to taper a bit as we go into mid-retirement, and then maybe, for some, experience an uptick later on in life, towards the end of life, largely due to healthcare costs. But what's fascinating, even in his own research, when you remove the extreme outliers, retirement spending tends to flatten without any sort of uptick near the end of life, regardless of household, regardless of income level. And I really want you to sit with that for a moment, because even the households that start off by spending $100 or $120,000 a year, they don't typically stay there. And it's not because they're running out of money, it's because their lifestyle has a way of changing over time. They travel less, they simplify, their priorities shift. And this should really change how we think about that retirement income number, because that $120,000 or that $100,000 figure that's not likely to be the spending sustained every year in retirement, it's likely a moment in time, very early on in retirement, when spending is at its highest. Overwhelmingly, retirement is not about maintaining a single, fixed spending throughout the rest of your life. Rather, you're probably going to want to build a plan that evolves with you, your energy, your activities, your desires, the lifestyle that you're living at different stages. There's another reason this range can feel surprising, and it comes down to how we think about wealth versus how wealth actually shows up. Often we talk about wealth from an average stance, and average numbers, as we know, are quite inflated by outliers. When we compare it to median, and when we look at spending, we have largely the same situation. A small percentage of very wealthy households, like those with 5 million or 10 million, 20 million or more, pull the average way up. But that is not representative of the typical millionaire. Often, when we hear this idea of a millionaire, we might picture someone living on $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 a year, taking a luxurious vacation, spending as much as they want. But that's not the typical millionaire. More millionaires are clustering around the 1 million range than they are around the $10 million range, because a household with $1, $2, or $3 million simply doesn't have the same capacity to spend $200 or $300,000 a year in retirement forever. And I also think there's another layer to this. When most of us think about retirement spending, we tend to think about it through the lens of working income. And those are two very different systems. While you're working, you're saving a portion of your income. You're paying payroll taxes. You have commuting costs, work expenses, time constraints. But in retirement, you're no longer doing these things. Someone might hear $100,000 in retirement and compare that to a $100,000 income in the working years. But they're not equivalent. That's not an apples-to-apples comparison. So when you combine these two ideas, looking at average versus median distortion, looking at things through the lens of working income versus retirement income, you can start to see why our expectations are disconnected from the data. Because the typical millionaire likely isn't living the lifestyle you imagine, and retirement income is not an exact mirror of working income. So where this $70,000 to $120,000 range actually comes from? Because this range isn't random. It seems to show up again and again because retirement income is built around some everyday assumptions. First, assumed replacement rates. Research from JP Morgan shows most households spend around 70 to 80% of their pre-retirement income. So, if your household had a $100,000 income, you might be targeting $70,000 to $80,000 in retirement. If your household had $150,000 income, you might be targeting $90,000 to $120,000. And here's one more thing that matters from an assumption standpoint. The typical household that reaches $1 million in investable assets by retirement age tended to have a household income in peak earning years of $90,000 to $150,000. So, we're putting ourselves in this exact same range. Second, income stacking. When you look at how retirement income is built, we see a clear pattern. Data from Fidelity Investments shows that for both single and married households, Social Security tends to range in the $30,000 to $60,000 range for a household. And portfolio income from million-dollar portfolios tends to come in at $40,000 to $80,000. Combine these two sources, and once again, you land right in that same range, $70,000 to $120,000 per year. And that's the key. Retirement income isn't coming from just one place. It's layered. And when we layer these together, we seem to get a very similar and common result. And third, portfolio math. Research from Morningstar shows that a $1 to $2.5 million portfolio supports roughly $35,000 to $100,000 in annual withdrawals under very conservative assumptions. Then add in Social Security and you get right back to that magical range. So this is the number the system keeps producing. Whether we're asking the Federal Reserve, whether we're asking Morningstar, JP Morgan, Fidelity, they all seem to land in this same range. So why do we keep seeing this $70,000 to $120,000 range show up over and over again? Well, number one, Social Security creates a floor. For most households, Social Security creates a meaningful baseline. Many married couples receive roughly $40,000 to $70,000 per year combined. Now, yes, the average Social Security benefit is about $2,000 a month, but nuance matters. Millionaire households are overwhelmingly married, so they tend to have higher Social Security benefits because they have two benefits coming in, and they tend to have stronger earnings histories. Once you have a strong floor in place, a large portion of retirement spending is covered before you even have to turn to your portfolio. Number two, most millionaires are in a narrow band. When we say millionaire, it sounds like a wide range, but in reality it's pretty concentrated. According to data from the Federal Reserve, roughly 75% of millionaire households fall between $1 million and $3 million in net worth. So, let's walk through a simple example. Let's say you have a $1.5 million portfolio. You're safe using a 4% withdrawal rate. That's going to give you $60,000. Add in Social Security, and you're right around that $100,000 household income. Number three, spending doesn't scale with wealth. Even as wealth increases, spending doesn't increase proportionally. If someone's net worth doubles, they don't automatically double their spending, and there's a few reasons for that. Core expenses, housing, food, healthcare, they don't scale dramatically. Time and energy, not money, becomes the limiting factor in retirement. And many retirees naturally shift towards simpler, more stable lifestyles over time, regardless of wealth. So even higher net worth households tend to anchor around spending that they're comfortable with, rather than thinking, oh, I should be spending more now my portfolio is larger. I should be expanding my spending. Most people don't have that kind of mindset. So the result is, when you combine Social Security as a floor, millionaires who tend to have similar portfolio sizes and spending that tends to stabilize, you sort of get this clustering effect. When we talk about retirement planning, most models assume people will spend about 70% to 80% of their pre-retirement income. That's the plan. But when you look at research from Fidelity, from Morningstar, from the Employee Benefit Research Institute, that's not the outcome we see. Roughly 60% to 80% of retirees end up spending less than they expected. And importantly, this effect is even more pronounced among upper-middle-class households, the mass affluent, and yes, millionaire households. Why? Because life has a way of unfolding a little bit differently than expected. Spending does tend to decline as we age. Our desire to spend tends to soften. I was recently at a dinner with a handful of 80 and 90-plus-year-olds, and we were talking about buying clothes. Now, I love buying clothes, but every single one of the other people at this dinner table said, I have no desire to buy any clothes. I don't need them. I haven't bought them for years. I simply re-wear what I have. Also, there's this built-in just-in-case mindset that has a way of keeping people a little bit more conservative. And many of those big aspirational expenses, travel experiences, lifestyle upgrades, don't fully materialize the way that people dreamed of when they were younger. Most people don't become a completely different person in retirement. You might have a new reality that you dream of, and you might have a whole list of things you want to do. But keep in mind, you're probably going to carry your same preferences and your same habits into retirement. There's that saying of, everywhere you go, there you are. So often there's this gap between what people think they'll spend once they go into retirement and then what they actually end up spending once they do retire. Now, there's another reason, and perhaps one of the biggest reasons this range keeps showing up. Because once you enter into retirement, your income doesn't just happen. Fortunately, you gain more control of your income once you retire. When you look at that $70,000 to $120,000 range, it's not just about lifestyle, it's often strategic. It's tax efficient. It's more aware and optimized around how Social Security is taxed. Here's what I mean. In retirement, people aren't just spending. They're often deciding where their income is coming from. Do they pull from a traditional IRA and increase taxable income? Do they draw from a Roth account and keep income lower? Do they realize capital gains or defer them? And these decisions have real consequences, because as you pull more income, it can increase the percentage of Social Security that is taxed. If you pull more income, it can change the way your capital gains are taxed, and they may be taxed at a higher rate. You could also cross an IRMA threshold and make it so that your Medicare premiums are higher for an entire year. And this is where Medicare planning becomes so important, because a lot of times people aren't aware of where these thresholds are. And even if you surpass them by $1, you increase your Medicare surcharges, your healthcare surcharges for an entire year. And this is exactly why I've partnered with a company called Chapter. They are an unbiased Medicare advisory service platform. So if you are at Medicare age or near Medicare age and you want to compare plans, if you want them to evaluate your plan, they can do that for free. Just give them a call. They'll help you look over the best plan for you based on your prescriptions, your location, your doctors. They really focus on finding the right plan for you. And that means finding the right plan for you from a medical perspective as well as from a financial perspective. And they will walk you through the entire process and make it as easy as possible. I have a phone number and an affiliate link down below. I recommend you check them out. So, what do many retirees do? They manage to arrange not consciously saying, hey, I want my income to be $100,000 a year exactly, but by making decisions that keep them below key tax thresholds and within a more efficient overall tax structure. Also, some income may not even be visible. If a retiree is pulling from a Roth account, we may not even see that income from a tax perspective. So when we look at spending data, especially for high net worth households, we may actually be underestimating their spending abilities simply because much of the spending coming from a Roth account is blind from a tax perspective and it doesn't get reported. So ultimately, we find that we have so many millionaire households living within this income range because this is the income range that the system sort of nudges them into. If they move beyond that range, there are real tax consequences. Now, to be clear, this range is not universal. There are very real situations where it breaks down. Say we have an early retiree. There's no Social Security yet, so the portfolio has to carry everything. For high spenders, households targeting 150 or 250 or more as a lifestyle. High cost of living areas where the baseline expenses are simply higher. This isn't a rule, it's a pattern. And understanding where it applies is also just as important as understanding where it doesn't. And remember, this is personal finance. None of these numbers are tailored to your situation. So to figure out your number, you need to run your numbers. So here's what I want you to take away. A $70,000 to $100,000 income. I'm not saying that that's the goal. I'm not saying that the vast majority of people are saying that that's what they want to spend, or that they should spend. Instead, it's sort of what happens when constraints are applied. When we have similar portfolio sizes and use similar withdrawal rates, when our Social Security benefits look similar, we face similar taxes and the same longevity risks. So, What are your thoughts on millionaire households clustering their spending in this $70,000 to $120,000 range? I'm very curious. Leave your thoughts down below. I post new videos every single week. If you got anything at all out of this one, please give it a like. If you're new here, please consider subscribing if you're at or near Medicare age. Check out chapter link and phone number down below. I will see you guys in the next one. Bye. This mic, it does not stay up. There's like all these knobs to twist and turn, and I don't think any of them do anything. I'm certain that one does not do anything with this. What do I do? Ooh, progress. We're making progress. I think. I don't know. Well, clearly. What the freak? Okay, come on. Work with me. Work with me. What do we do? What do we do? You know better than I do. No, you don't. Come on. We're just going to leave it like that and pray. That's what I do every video if anybody's wondering. Oh, best band ever. So, OAR, they're the best.